Hello, my name's Rowan. At my grandfather's funeral, I was the only one crying, while my father, my brother, and his wife stood 3 feet away, whispering about who gets what, like I was just some stranger off the street. They didn't even look at me. A week later, the photographer from that day called me, his voice trembling. He said, "Sir, I think someone wanted this footage buried. You need to see it, but come alone." I thought I'd already lost everything. Turns out I hadn't even scratched the surface. Why did my own family want me kept in the dark? And what did Grandpa leave behind that made them this desperate to erase me? You're about to find out. I reached the funeral home in Springfield just as the sky dimmed into that dull gray that always makes the air feel heavier. I pulled the door open, stepped inside, and let the warmth hit me. It did nothing to steady me. Not today. I had barely slept since my grandfather passed, and every step toward the viewing room felt like I was walking deeper into a place I wasn't sure I belonged. I told myself I came to say goodbye. Nothing more. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want another scene. I just wanted one quiet moment with the only man in this family who ever treated me as if I mattered. My father, Harlan, was already positioned near the reception table. He didn't look at me. He just waved his hand at the staff like he was running a company meeting. My brother, Cade, moved around the room with that self-assured smile he always wore when there were enough people around to admire him. And his wife, Sable, managed the guest list with the kind of politeness that cut more than it comforted. The moment I walked farther into the chapel, I felt the shift. This wasn't neutral ground. It was theirs. I was just passing through. I took a slow breath and made my way toward the front rows where our family normally sat. An usher noticed me and paused. He gave me a look like he wasn't sure if he should let me pass. Then he glanced toward Harlan. My father barely moved his head, but that small shake said everything. It was the same signal I had seen my entire life. Not here, not now, not you. I could have turned around, but something in me refused. So I stepped into the family aisle anyway and sat at the end of the row, holding the program with my grandfather's photo. His calm eyes stared back at me, and for a moment I found a sliver of grounding. I felt a firm hand on my shoulder. Cade leaned down and whispered, low enough for only me to hear, "That section is for immediate family." I blinked at him. For a second, I honestly didn't know if he was serious. "I am immediate family," I said quietly. He gave a thin smile, the kind that made my skin tighten. "Let's not do this today." Before I could respond, Sable stepped in beside him. Her voice was soft, but the meaning hit harder than anything else that afternoon. "There's room in the back. It might be simpler for you. Simpler for you." The words landed with a weight I couldn't hide from. Cade didn't shove me. Sable didn't raise her voice. They didn't have to. They angled their bodies just enough and guided me out of the row. Not aggressive, just deliberate. Careful enough to look polite. Clear enough to make sure everyone nearby saw exactly what they thought of me. My face burned as I moved toward the last pew. I lowered myself onto the wooden bench and stared down at my hands so I wouldn't have to meet the puzzled looks from a few people who turned to see why I'd been moved. I felt the pulse in my throat jump and settle somewhere tight in my chest. I almost spoke up. The words hovered behind my teeth, ready to slip out. But then I saw my grandfather's picture on the program again. This was his day, not mine. So I swallowed it and stared toward the front, refusing to blink. Still, the shame stayed there, pressing on my ribs. It didn't come from being sent to the back. It came from how practiced they were at doing it. A couple of guests shot me sympathetic looks, as if trying to understand why I was sitting apart from the people who shared my last name. I ignored them and focused on the coffin. That was the only thing keeping me steady. The only reminder of someone who never treated me like a shadow. A thought slid through me without permission. Has anyone ever acted like you didn't belong in your own family? I didn't say it out loud. It just hung there, tucked inside the ache in my chest. The minister stepped forward and the room quieted. I felt my vision blur. Some of it was grief. Much of it wasn't. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, trying to pull myself together before anyone noticed. Then I felt movement beside me. A distant relative, someone who had known my grandfather since long before I was born, sat down for a moment. Without saying a word, she placed something in my palm. It was his handkerchief, faded cotton, worn around the edges. I looked at it, confused, but closed my fingers around it anyway. The service began. Voices rose. Music played. I barely heard any of it. I just held that handkerchief, as if gripping a part of him could keep me from falling through the floor. As I dabbed my face with my grandfather's handkerchief, a hushed voice slipped past the front rows. My father's voice, low but clear enough to stop my breath mid-motion. Make sure Rowan doesn't get involved in any of the financial discussions. I froze. My hand lowered slowly, the cloth still balled in my palm. I'd braced myself for a cold shoulder, maybe a passive-aggressive comment or two, but not this. Not being disqualified like I was some distant cousin who wandered in by mistake. The service wrapped up soon after. People shuffled into the adjoining room for coffee and cookies, whispering the usual condolences. I stayed back, seated in that same wooden pew until most of the noise faded into background hum. I didn't want to look like I was avoiding the family, but I sure as hell didn't feel invited to join them either. I slipped the handkerchief into my pocket, the soft cotton suddenly feeling heavier than it should. I kept my head down and moved with the crowd, pretending like I had a purpose, though I had none. Today is supposed to be about him, I reminded myself. My grandfather. Not them. Not this power game. But the tension was already wound too tight. I made my way to the table where they placed the condolence book. Figured I'd at least sign my name. Do the decent thing. As I approached, I felt it immediately. The stiffness. The shift. My father's posture straightened as if someone had slapped his spine. Cade and Sable stopped whispering mid-sentence, eyes locking for just a second before darting away like nothing happened. They were talking about me. I didn't need proof. I could feel it in my bones. Still, I didn't stop walking. I picked up the pen, scrawled a short message under someone else's shaky cursive, and just as I capped the pen, I heard it. Cade, in that calm, managerial tone of his. Dad, we need to finalize the property split before he tries something. Sable chimed in like she was adjusting throw pillows instead of cutting family lines. You know how he gets when he's emotional. Then came my father's voice again, quieter this time, but still measured, like he was sealing a deal. He won't be part of the discussion. Let's finish this today. I stood there, pen still in hand, not 10 feet away, and they didn't lower their voices, didn't glance around to check if I was within earshot, as if I'd become furniture, as if I wasn't family. Not really. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so blatant it bordered on theatrical. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Problem was, I knew they had no legal ground. I wasn't clueless. Missouri's inheritance laws are clear. unless he left specific instructions excluding me, which I highly doubted. I was just as much a legal heir as they were. But this wasn't about legality. This was about dominance, about who gets to speak and who gets shoved to the back pew. They were banking on me to stay quiet, to do what I always did. Let them call the shots while I stood off to the side, grateful for whatever crumbs they allowed. But this time, something shifted. I stepped back from the table, chest tight, heart thudding like I'd just run uphill. Not from anger, at least not only anger. It was that strange sting that sits somewhere between shame and suspicion. What are they trying to lock down before I even open my mouth? The thought rattled through me as I wandered toward the hallway where they'd set up a screen playing old photos of my grandfather. One frame faded into the next every few seconds. His wedding day, a fishing trip, him laughing at some long-forgotten family barbecue. Then a photo came up I hadn't seen in years. Me, around 10, standing beside him, proud as hell, holding up my first red toolbox, his hand on my shoulder. That big grin of his like I'd just built a rocket ship instead of fixing a squeaky door. I stared at it too long. "You told me to stand up when something wasn't right," I whispered. "I hear you." That small moment, that one photo, steadied me more than anything else that day. Behind me, I could feel the glances again. Some older relatives, probably more loyal to my grandfather than to my father, shot me those subtle, sympathetic looks. One of them, a great-aunt maybe, started toward me, hesitated, then backed off with a quiet sigh. Too scared to be seen choosing sides, it hit me again. That invisible line, drawn in silence, guarded by guilt. And a question echoed in my mind, sharper now. Have you ever heard family talk about you like you weren't standing right there? I stood there longer than I should have, not moving, watching photo after photo flicker past like a movie I was no longer cast in. Eventually, I turned to leave, not sure where I was going, just needing air, needing space from all of them. And that's when I heard my father's voice again, low and clipped, half swallowed in frustration. We should have handled this before he showed up. I didn't know what this was, but it sure as hell didn't sound like grief. The grip on my arm wasn't harsh, but it stopped me cold. I turned around and came face to face with a man I hadn't seen in years, Franklin Doss, one of my grandfather's closest friends from the old community center days. He was older now, thinner, more bent at the shoulders than I remembered, but his eyes were alert and filled with something I hadn't seen all day. Fear. "Rowan," he said under his breath, glancing past me toward the funeral home doors. "Walk with me." I followed him a few steps away from the entrance, out toward the gravel strip near the edge of the lot, where an old oak leaned hard against the wind. The air had turned colder, the sky pressing down, bloated with clouds that looked like they were holding something back. Franklin kept looking over his shoulder. His hand was still shaking when he rubbed it over his jaw, like he wasn't sure he should speak at all. "Look," he started, voice gravelly. "I don't have long, and I don't want to make this harder for you than it already is. But your grandfather, he left something meant for you." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He paused. His mouth opened, then closed. "It's complicated. Try me." He let out a breath, glancing back at the door again. "He told me, if anything happened to him, and if Harlan or Cade tried to keep you out, I was supposed to give you this." Franklin reached into his coat and pulled out a worn, folded envelope. Yellowed slightly at the edges. My grandfather's handwriting was visible in ballpoint blue ink, even from where I stood, but he didn't hand it over. Before I could say a word, Franklin's posture snapped stiff. His eyes shifted behind me. "Not now," he whispered quickly. "Sable's coming." Sure enough, I turned and spotted her making her way toward us, high heels clicking sharp on the pavement, the same concerned expression she wore like a designer scarf. Franklin slid the envelope back into his jacket with an awkward jerk. He leaned in closer and said quietly, "Meet me tomorrow, alone, by the old workshop. You remember where that is?" I nodded without thinking, but my chest tightened. Of course I remembered. That place, tucked behind his house, half swallowed by trees, was where I learned everything that ever made me feel useful. The scent of sawdust, the cool grip of tools passed from his hand to mine. It was where he taught me to respect the grain of the wood, never fight it. "You've got a builder's heart," he'd said once. "Steady. That matters more than fast hands." Sable got within a few feet, smile already in place. "There you are," she cooed, glancing between us. "Rowan, everything okay? You look overwhelmed." I stepped slightly to block Franklin from view, buying him a second to breathe. "I'm fine," I said. "Just needed air." Her lips curled tighter, like the edge of a knife hidden in velvet. Grief does strange things, doesn't it? People start imagining all kinds of things. Misunderstandings happen when everyone's raw. She wasn't accusing, not directly, but every word she spoke was aimed like a dart, soft voice, hard point. I didn't answer, just nodded once, neutral. Sable's gaze lingered a beat longer, then shifted to Franklin. "I don't believe we've met." "We go way back," Franklin replied with a dry chuckle. "Just catching up." "Well," she said, drawing out the word, "I'll leave you two to it. But Rowan, don't wander too far. We still need to go over a few things." I waited until she walked off, then turned back, but Franklin was already retreating toward his car. He looked over his shoulder once, just once, and the look on his face wasn't just serious, it was afraid, like he knew exactly how deep the hole I was standing near might go. I headed toward my truck, mind racing. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. I wasn't even surprised. But I was starting to feel the shape of something bigger underneath all this. The envelope. The workshop. The way my name was being tiptoed around like it didn't belong in the same breath as the word family. Someone else saw it. Someone besides me. I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. Just before I started the engine, I caught Franklin through the windshield, standing at his own car, watching me. No words, just that one expression that said more than any warning he could have given aloud. Don't trust them. The air in the truck felt stale, too quiet, and there it was again. This question that had started rattling around in me, growing louder with every interaction since I walked through the funeral home doors. Have you ever felt like the only honest person in a room full of people hiding something? The steering wheel felt cold under my palms. I drove off slow, not wanting to draw attention, but needing to get away from that building. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror, waiting for the funeral home to shrink behind me. But as I turned onto the main road, headlights appeared in the mirror. Too close. A car. Same make as Cade's. It didn't speed, didn't swerve. It just followed, keeping just enough distance to pretend it wasn't. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just another car on the same route. Springfield wasn't exactly a metropolis. People shared roads, passed the same intersections, made the same turns. But after the third random detour, and watching that same dark blue sedan shadow every single move, I stopped pretending it was nothing. When I looped around the old feed store, one my grandfather used to take me to on Saturdays just to shoot the breeze with the boys, the sedan turned with me, slower, deliberate, like the driver didn't want to be obvious, just close enough to remind me he was there. I tried again. Took a sudden right past the closed-down diner my grandfather once claimed had the best pecan pie in the state. Still there. That car. Every single time. The unease turned into something sharper. This wasn't some coincidence. This was someone watching me, tracking me. Someone who didn't want me to make it to the old workshop tomorrow. That told me one thing. Whatever Franklin had was more than just sentimental. It was dangerous, at least to someone. I turned again, this time cutting through a back neighborhood I knew better than most. Single-story houses, old oaks, cracked driveways with kids' chalk drawings fading under tire tracks. My truck rumbled over the uneven pavement. Then I pulled hard to the curb and parked under the shadow of an elm tree. Windows down, engine running. The blue sedan hesitated at the four-way stop. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd keep going, but then he slowed, real slow. He passed, glanced sideways. A man in a gray ball cap, thick shoulders. Didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared, then kept going. And I knew that face. Couldn't name it right away, but I'd seen it before. Somewhere near Cade's office. One of the warehouse guys, maybe, from his contracting firm. So that's how far this went. I sat back in my seat, heart knocking against my ribs. The funeral, the seating, the envelope Franklin tried to give me. And now this. If they were trying to stop me from getting to the truth, they weren't just being petty. They were scared. And that meant I was getting close. I took a few deep breaths, trying to slow the fire rising in my gut. My hand brushed the handkerchief still folded in my jacket pocket, my grandfather's. It was warm from my body heat, soft and familiar. He used to tell me, "Quiet men see more than loud ones, and steady hands build things that last." I didn't feel steady right now. But I wasn't backing down either. The sun had dropped low by the time I pulled into my driveway. Kids rode bikes past the edge of the cul-de-sac. A man across the street waved while walking his golden retriever. The kind of neighborhood where everybody kept their lawns tidy and left the porch light on, even when no one was home. It never felt like the kind of place my family belonged to. And maybe that's why I liked it. I grabbed my keys, stepped out, and paused at the mailbox. The door was hanging open, just enough to be noticeable. I always shut it. I reached in. One envelope, no stamp, no return address. I looked around instinctively. Nothing moved but wind through the hedges. Inside the envelope was a photo. A printed still, pulled from what looked like security footage. It showed my truck parked outside the funeral home. A red circle was drawn around me mid-step, holding that handkerchief. Below the image, in bold block font, was a single line, "Don't meet him." My stomach flipped. They were watching me. Not just following me. They had access, security footage. That wasn't something just anyone could get their hands on. This was calculated, not some heat-of-the-moment intimidation move. This was a warning, delivered calmly, clearly. That ruled out amateurs. It pointed straight at the two people with power and resources, my father and my brother. I walked inside, locking the door behind me, dropped the envelope on the kitchen table, and stared at it like it might start talking. They were trying to shut me down before anything began, which only proved Franklin was right. Something was buried, and my grandfather didn't trust the family to handle it. That meant I had to. I sat on the edge of the couch, That photo burning a hole in my thoughts. Fear had been sitting heavy in my chest all day. Now something else edged in. Resolve. Have you ever felt fear turn into clarity? That moment when you stop running and decide you're not backing down anymore? I did now. I stood and moved to the kitchen window, pulling back the curtain just enough to scan the street. Peaceful. Too peaceful. I started to walk toward the back room to lock the sliding door when I heard a vehicle slow behind the house. Tires rolled over gravel. I turned. Waited. Not the blue sedan. Another car pulled up. Black SUV. Familiar. Then I saw him. My father stepped out. He didn't rush, didn't even close the door. He just stood there for a moment, adjusting his jacket, like this was a casual visit, not a tactical play. He looked calm. Too calm. He glanced around, then walked slowly toward my front porch, arms loose at his sides, but posture tight. The same look he had when I was a kid and he was about to give a speech he didn't want, interrupted. Then he said it. "Son, we need to talk. Now." And as he stepped onto the porch, everything in me knew. He wasn't here to comfort me. He was here to stop me. He stepped fully into the porch light, and the glow caught the lines around his eyes. Lines I used to mistake for wisdom. Tonight, they looked like armor. He didn't waste time. "Whatever you think you heard today," he said, "forget it." The words landed with a weight that squeezed the air right out of my chest. That tone wasn't new. It was the same one he used when I was a kid, and he wanted me quiet before I even knew I had something to say. All it took was the sound of his voice, and the muscles in my shoulders reacted on instinct. I steadied myself, leaning one hand on the porch railing. The street was calm. Porch light casting a soft circle under our feet. Nothing about the world outside matched the tension coiling tight between us. "Why did you let Kate and Sable shove me out of the conversation?" I asked. "Why wasn't I allowed to be part of anything? I'm family too." He exhaled like I was exhausting him. "Let adults handle adult matters." It hit like a slap I couldn't block. I was 43, standing on my own porch, and still being talked to like a teenager who forgot to take out the trash. He stepped closer. I didn't move. "Your grandfather carried you long enough," he said. "You owe this family peace. Instead, you stir things up. You always have." The precision in his tone was sharp. He knew exactly where to aim. He always did. He didn't have to shout. He never needed volume to win. He had my history. "You're emotional," he continued. "You hear what you want to hear. You imagine insults even when no one is talking about you." There it was. The old, familiar cut. Delivered calmly. Meant to shrink me. My throat tightened. For a moment, the old reflex kicked in, telling me to nod, apologize, disappear into myself until the storm passed. That reaction had been carved into me over years, and trying to fight it felt like pushing against a wall that never budged. I almost said it, almost let the words slip out. "It's fine, Dad." But then I remembered the envelope sitting on my kitchen table, the surveillance photo, the red circle around my body like a target. Someone had violated my privacy, tracked me, watched me, and sent a warning straight to my house. Not a misunderstanding, not something I imagined. Someone went too far, and my father was here now, telling me to forget everything. I swallowed hard and lifted my eyes to his. "I'm meeting one of Grandpa's friends tomorrow," I said slowly. "He has something for me." The shift in his expression was small, but I caught it. His jaw locked. His blink froze. He heard more than just the sentence. "No," he said. "You're not meeting him." I held my ground, though my knees felt unsteady. He said, "It's important." He stepped in, voice low, controlled. "Rowan, listen carefully. If you go, don't expect this family to clean up after whatever mess you create." Threat, plain as day. And he knew exactly what it would do to me. I'd spent years trying not to be a burden, not to add problems, as he put it. His words dug right into those old fault lines. My hands curled slightly at my sides. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I just want to know what Granddad meant for me. That's all." He didn't soften, didn't blink. "He meant nothing that concerns you." He turned and walked away, as if the conversation was finished and I was too small to add anything that mattered. His SUV door shut. The engine sparked to life. Then he was gone, rolling down the street without a second glance. The porch felt colder after he left. I didn't move for a long moment, just breathed slow, trying to get the shaking in my hands to stop. Once I stepped inside, the house swallowed me in quiet, a stillness that wasn't comforting anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place I dropped the surveillance photo earlier. The envelope still lay there, threatening without making a sound. I pressed my palm against my pocket, feeling the soft fabric of my grandfather's handkerchief. That simple thing felt heavier tonight, like memory had weight. The man who raised me didn't coddle me, but he never robbed me of my voice either. He never told me I imagined things that were right in front of me. He never tried to rewrite who I was. Now even the last piece of him, whatever he left, was being cornered by the same family who shut me out of everything else. Have you ever tried to stand up for yourself, only to feel your strength collapse because the person hurting you was someone you once trusted? I let that question sit in my head, because I knew I wasn't the only one who'd ever felt that. I stared at the wall, at the envelope, at nothing. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the handkerchief. I hadn't really looked at it earlier, not closely. The edges were frayed, but the stitching in the corner caught the light. My initials, not his, mine. That detail seeped in slow like warm water spreading through cold fabric. He hadn't passed it down because he was old. He hadn't given it to me by accident. He meant it for me. And suddenly, everything felt clearer. I lifted the handkerchief and ran my thumb across the stitching. And in that small motion, a quiet truth settled into place, steady and undeniable. So the next morning, before sunrise, I drove toward my grandfather's old workshop, hoping no one would be bold enough to follow me that early. The world hadn't fully woken up yet. A soft layer of fog hugged the road and fields on the outskirts of town. The sun hadn't broken the horizon, but a gray glow stretched just enough to show shapes, fences, bare trees, the rusted mailbox I passed every time I visited this side of Springfield. I kept my truck lights low and took side roads when I could. My hands stayed tight on the wheel, the handkerchief folded in my pocket, pressing warm against my ribs. I whispered once, barely loud enough to hear myself, "Please, let this still be here." The workshop came into view just past the abandoned grain barn, hidden from the main road by old pine trees. My grandfather had built the place with his own hands, board by board, back when he still believed in keeping things separate from town gossip. As a kid, I ran circles around it, chasing my own shadow while he tinkered inside. Now it looked smaller, like time had collapsed it just enough to make me realize how far I drifted from who I used to be. I parked a good distance away, behind the barn. No blue sedan, no family truck, no strange lights flickering through the windows. That gave me my first clean breath in days. This is it, I told myself, stepping out and keeping my footsteps quiet on the damp grass. He wanted me here. Something's waiting. The workshop door was cracked open, just a little. Enough to suggest someone had either come in a hurry or left without finishing something. I stepped inside. At first I thought I was just early. Maybe he was running late. Maybe the fog slowed him down. But then I looked closer. The place was wrong. Tools were scattered across the floor. A mug had been knocked off the old workbench and lay shattered near the stool I remembered sitting on when I was 12. The faint smell of coffee still clung to the air, fresh enough to feel out of place. And then I saw it, on the ground near the bench. A torn corner of an envelope, the same aged beige color. Jagged edge, like someone had ripped it apart mid-stride. He'd been here, and someone else had too. I froze. Every sound in the workshop sharpened. A fly buzzed weakly near the back window. The wooden floor creaked softly as I took another step, scanning for signs of more damage. I crouched beside the bench, sawdust scattered across the floor. A stack of old blueprints sat untouched in the corner, but the drawers beneath the bench had been forced open, gouges along the edges where a tool had pried them loose. Someone had been searching, not just ransacking, deliberately looking. Then I saw the boot print, faint but fresh in the soft dust near the rear wall. I leaned in. It was a size I recognized. A tread I'd seen before. Cade's boots. He bragged about them last Thanksgiving. Said they cost more than most people's rent. Same crosshatch. Pattern on the sole. My stomach turned. Near the same corner, half hidden under sawdust, a glint caught my eye. I brushed it gently. A small, cracked camera lens. I stared at it for a long time. This workshop had been wired. My grandfather had hidden a camera in here, and someone found it, destroyed it. That meant he knew whatever he kept here needed protection. He didn't trust people, not even in death. And neither should I. My hands began to tremble, not from fear, not yet. From the sick realization that this wasn't just some misunderstanding. This was a hunt. I whispered again, this time to him, even though he wasn't here. What did you leave me that made them so afraid? I reached into the broken drawer and found a zip pouch. Inside were old measuring tapes, a screwdriver, a weathered compass. I emptied it, slid the cracked lens in, zipped it tight, and tucked it into my jacket. Then I grabbed the torn envelope corner and slid that into my back pocket. Have you ever stepped into a place from your childhood only to feel it turned against you? It wasn't just a question. It was the exact weight in my chest. I stepped outside, carefully easing the door closed behind me. The morning fog had started to lift. Birdsong trickled in from somewhere across the field. It should have been peaceful. Then I heard it. Gravel shifting. Tires crunching slow across the road near the barn. I ducked low, moving quickly to the back wall of the barn where the shadows still lingered. My breath came fast, shoulders tense. The truck rolled into view. Cade's. He parked like he'd done it 100 times. No hesitation. And then the passenger door opened. My breath caught in my throat. The man who stepped out wore a gray cap, same one from the car that followed me after the funeral. His face was still mostly hidden by the brim, but I didn't need to see it all to feel my blood chill. They'd come together, which meant this wasn't about misunderstanding. It was control. Elimination. They walked toward the workshop door, unaware I was watching, and their first words confirmed everything. I was never meant to find the truth. I pressed my back against the rough wood siding of the barn, heart pounding steady but hard. Cade's boots crunched with that same confidence he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. The man in the gray cap followed him, glancing around like someone checking corners in a place they had no business being. Neither of them looked nervous, only thorough. "We better not find him here," Cade muttered, his voice low but clear. The man responded flatly, "Your dad said he was too scared to show. Place looks clean." Clean. That word hit me sideways. Then Gray Cap added, "We grabbed the envelope last night." A wave of nausea pushed up my throat. The envelope, Grandpa's friend. All of it. They got to him first. Something under my boot shifted. A dry plank, barely cracked, let out a pop like a knuckle. Both men turned toward the sound. Cade's brows furrowed. Gray Cap's hand moved inside his jacket like instinct. That motion alone told me what I needed to know. This wasn't about family drama anymore. "Rowan?" Cade called out. "That you?" I didn't answer. I stayed still, lungs quiet. But every cell in my body was awake now. I had two choices: run and prove them right, or stand up and finally stop being the quiet one they dismissed. I stepped out. The look on Cade's face slid from mild surprise to deep irritation in a blink. He recovered fast. He always did. Gray Cap didn't say a word, just stood with his hand still close to whatever he was hiding. "I was hoping to talk to Grandpa's friend," I said, keeping my tone even. "But he's not here." Cade smirked. "Maybe he changed his mind." Gray Cap chimed in, his voice as dull as his eyes. "Old folks wander off sometimes." The cruelty wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was in the suggestion that the man I spoke with yesterday was just confused, maybe even lost. They wanted me to believe he'd simply vanished on his own. But I saw what they didn't know I'd seen. The torn envelope, the broken camera lens, the scuffed footprints in the dust. "You were never supposed to get anything," Cade said suddenly, the smirk back on his lips. "Grandpa promised the business to Dad and me years ago." That hit like a sucker punch. He continued, enjoying the moment too much. "He said you didn't have the spine to run anything. Said you'd find a way to ruin it like you always ruin things." That voice. That phrasing. It was Dad's, word for word. Cade had just been parroting what he'd been taught. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't respond with fists. I didn't even raise my voice. Instead, I asked calmly, "If that's true, there'd be a will, or at least something in writing. Video. Evidence." Cade's grin dropped an inch. Gray Cap looked at him, confused. "You don't know anything," Cade snapped, sharp and fast. "That slip told me everything. There was something, and they were hiding it." I took a step back, just one, keeping my eyes on them both. "If Grandpa's friend ends up hurt, or if anything happens to him," I said, voice steady, "you're not going to be able to cover it up." Gray Cap shifted. "Man, this wasn't part of the deal. I didn't sign up to hurt anybody." Cade turned on him like a snake. "Shut up." That right there, that crack, was gold. Cade was losing control, and Gray Cap had limits he didn't plan for. Have you ever seen the truth slip from someone's lips just because they thought they owned you? It's a strange feeling, watching someone unravel under their own weight, especially when they've held yours over your head your whole life. Cade took a step toward me. I didn't move. He came close enough I could smell the aftershave he stole from Dad's drawer since he was 16, close enough to remember the last time we wrestled in the yard, and he split my lip, then told me to apologize to him. He leaned in and said under his breath, Walk away, Rowan. You don't want to know what you're digging into. But his voice wasn't cold. It was frayed. It wasn't warning me. It was fear. I didn't answer. I just took 2 steps back, turned, and walked away. Not in defeat, but in choice. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to hit. Their panic was louder than any words I could have said. Something was buried here, and they were already digging themselves a hole. As I got back to the truck, I reached for the door, but before I could pull it open, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A voice came through, trembling, breathless. They're coming for me. I couldn't hide it. The call cut out after those words, but the terror in his voice told me exactly who it was. The old friend had finally reached me. I didn't waste a second. My phone still tight in my grip, I yanked open the truck door and climbed in, gravel spitting under my tires as I reversed and gunned it onto the road. I tried calling him back. Once, twice. No answer. My fingers gripped the wheel tighter each time the line rang into nothing. The sky had shifted. Sunrise had crept in while I was busy walking through minefields. Now the road ahead was bathed in that golden edge of morning haze, making the pavement blur in patches. My chest felt like it was carrying something too big, too hot, and it had nowhere to go but forward. 20 minutes. That's what the GPS said. Every second of that felt like it was clawing against me. I knew where the old friend lived. I'd been there once as a kid. Grandpa had taken me along when he dropped off a batch of handmade birdhouses. The man's name was Lowell, lived alone on a back road framed with walnut trees that arched together overhead like an old church. As I pulled in, I saw it. The house, small and square, paint faded, porch sagging just slightly from time, and the front door cracked open. I slammed the gear into park, heart hammering. I didn't call out, didn't honk, just approached slowly, eyes sweeping the yard, the trees. Everything felt too still. Inside, the place smelled like old wood and dust. Quiet, save for the low creak of the floor under my boots. Then I saw him. Lowell was sitting on the kitchen floor, back leaned against the cabinet, breathing shallow. Not hurt, at least not badly, but rattled. They came last night, he said without looking up. His voice was dry, but steady. I crouched beside him. Who? He looked at me, eyes glassy, but clear. Your brother, and the one in the cap. They tore through everything, but I hid the real thing. He reached into the pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a small object wrapped in duct tape. A USB drive. This is what your grandfather wanted you to see. He gestured weakly toward the heating vent near the floor. I kept it there, behind the slats. They didn't check. They were too busy yelling. I held the drive like it was made of glass. In my jacket pocket, I felt the handkerchief, the soft reminder of the man who had somehow known all this might come. Now in my hands, I held the emotional anchor and the truth, 2 parts of the same message. Before I could speak, tires crunched outside. Lowell's eyes widened. That'll be them. I helped him up and guided him into the back room. It wasn't much, but the lock clicked, and that was enough for now. Then I slipped out the rear door, crept around the side of the house, and kept low behind the hedges. 2 vehicles had pulled up. One was Dad's black sedan, the other, Cade's truck. They stepped out in sequence, stiff, their expressions set hard. Not in concern, but calculation. They weren't here to check on Lowell. They were here to erase what was left. My father spotted me before Cade did. Rowan, he called. His voice was even, too even. Let's not make this worse. I stepped forward but stayed on the porch steps. Give me what he gave you, Dad said, walking slowly, hands visible. He was changing tactics now. No more barking orders. No more head shakes from across the room. This was the gentle voice, the one he used when he wanted you to second-guess your instincts. This family's always protected you, he said, even when you made things hard. Don't throw that away. It might have worked, once, but I had already seen the tail car. I'd already stood in Grandpa's workshop, swept sawdust from a broken camera lens. I'd already watched them lie to my face and twist history in the same breath. You're not protecting me, I said, loud enough for Cade to hear. You're protecting yourselves. Cade's face curled. Stop acting like you matter. And just like that, the last brick fell. I walked right past them. Rowan, my father snapped. But I didn't stop. I didn't even turn. That act alone, refusing to flinch, was more defiant than any shouting could have been. I drove straight home, hands tight on the wheel. That USB drive might as well have been burning through my center console. Back in my house, I didn't turn on the lights. I moved by memory, straight to the den where I kept my old laptop, the one not connected to the family network, not synced to any cloud, just sitting there like a time capsule. I powered it on, waited as the screen flickered to life, plugged in the drive. It took a few seconds to load. Then it appeared, a single file, for Rowan MP4. My fingers hovered over the touchpad. I clicked. There he was, Grandpa, sitting at his old workbench, face pale but eyes sharp. The light was dim but steady. His voice, when it came, was rough from age but deliberate. If you're watching this, Rowan, something happened to me. I couldn't breathe. They've been moving assets, illegally. Behind everyone's back, I confronted them. They told me you'd mess everything up if I gave you a say. That you were weak, that you'd talk. They said they'd cut you out completely. He paused, hands folded on the table. You're the only one I trust. I felt the heat rise behind my eyes. Everything I built was meant for you. Not because you earned it, but because you understand it. You saw the value in people, not in control. His voice trembled now, just a little. I'm sorry I didn't protect you more. The video ended, and with it, the version of my life I'd been living. The belittling, the isolation, the humiliation at the funeral, the whispers, the lies. All of it wasn't just family dysfunction, it was strategy. They weren't protecting a legacy, they were hiding theft. Have you ever realized the person your family warned you not to become was the only one telling you the truth? I sat back in my chair, shaking, not from fear, but from clarity. Everything made sense now. Every silence, every dismissal, every time I was made to feel like a burden. It was never about who I was. It was about what I might uncover. The screen faded to black, but Grandpa's last words still echoed. Stand up for yourself, son. They will not stop. And in that moment, I knew. Chapter 9 wouldn't be about surviving them. It would be about ending what they started. I wiped my eyes, steadied my breath, and prepared for the confrontation that would decide everything. My legacy, my safety, and the truth my grandfather died trying to protect. There was no anger left in me, not the kind that burned hot and wild. What filled me now was heavier, quieter, a resolve that had taken its time settling in. I moved deliberately, not like a man rushing to war, but like one walking into the room where it would all be finished. Back at the desk, I copied the video file from the USB drive onto 2 different external drives. One I kept in a fireproof box, The other slid into the glove compartment of my truck. I also printed stills from the video, Grandpa's face in mid-sentence, the moment he said, "Everything I built was meant for you." Another frame captured the document with his signature and timestamp, the one my father and Cade had tried so hard to keep buried. I placed them in a folder, simple and clean. This wasn't some wild swing at revenge. It was safeguarding the truth. I folded the handkerchief, his handkerchief, and slid it back into my jacket pocket. It used to just be cloth. Now it was a compass. The Community Legal Center downtown was a modest building, a mix of brick and glass near the courthouse. I'd chosen it because it was public, neutral, and surrounded by people whose job it was to witness and record. They were already waiting in the parking lot. My father stood tall, arms crossed, like this was just another errand. Cade leaned against the side of his truck, one leg bent, casual, but his eyes darted. They expected I'd walk up confused, that I'd ask questions, that I'd flinch. They weren't ready for silence. As I approached, Dad stepped forward. "Rowan, whatever you're planning, stop. Let's talk like men." There it was, the performance, the voice that used to make me feel like I'd done something wrong, even when I hadn't. I looked at him, steady. "We talk inside, in front of people who can't be bullied." His jaw tensed. Cade scoffed behind him. "You're making a fool of yourself." I turned my back on both of them and walked into the legal center lobby. There were two clerks at the front desk, a legal assistant in conversation near the windows, and a young attorney typing behind the counter. I asked if I could use the public presentation monitor, held up my folder, and said I had visual documents to submit for legal evaluation. They nodded. No questions. I plugged in the drive, clicked play. The lobby grew still as my grandfather's face lit up the screen. "If you're watching this, Rowan, something happened to me." His voice, weathered but determined, filled the space. It didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It just told the truth, plain and steady, about the asset transfers, the threats, the deliberate effort to shut me out, not from wealth, but from knowledge. He called out my father and Cade by name. He said he trusted me because I saw worth in people, not just in profit. By the time the video reached his final words, "Everything I built was meant for you," the clerks had stopped pretending to work. My father stood at the entrance, frozen. Cade pushed forward, shouting, "He forged that! He's unstable! It's edited!" I stepped back to the screen, opened the properties window, and displayed the time-stamped metadata. Then I laid the printed document, the notarized copy, on the front desk, quietly, cleanly. The lies cracked open, like a windshield spidering from the center out. Dad lunged forward, trying to yank the drive, but a security guard had already been watching from the corner. He stepped between us, firm but polite. "Sir, I'll have to ask you to calm down." My father didn't speak. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. For a long time, I had believed their version of me. The quiet one, the weaker one, the afterthought. But now, in the middle of that room, it was them who looked small. Not because I shouted, but because the truth didn't need to raise its voice. A woman in a blue blazer approached me. "This is enough to open a formal investigation," she said softly, "and we can file for an emergency hold on all remaining transfers." I nodded. That was exactly what I came for. Cade had slumped into one of the chairs along the wall. He rubbed his temples, muttering something about not going down for this. He wasn't yelling anymore. My father, though, he wasn't done yet. As the security guard guided him toward the exit, he stopped beside me. His voice was low, not angry now, but almost pleading. Rowan, we're blood. Don't destroy us. I pulled out the folded handkerchief, held it where he could see. His eyes landed on the stitching, my initials. You destroyed this family the moment you tried to erase me, I said. His shoulders dropped. The weight of what he'd lost finally touched him. Not money, not control, something deeper. He walked out without another word. And for the first time in years, I exhaled, fully. Later that evening, I drove back out to Lowell's place. He looked better, rested with a fresh bandage on his hand and a cup of coffee steaming on the table. I sat across from him, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. You did it? He asked. I nodded. They won't be able to hide behind the family name anymore. He gave a quiet chuckle. Your grandfather always said you had a steady heart. Today proved him right. As I stepped outside, the sun had dropped below the hills, leaving streaks of amber across the sky. The walnut trees rustled in the breeze like they were saying something I'd never quite understood until now. I reached into my pocket, touched the fabric one more time. The handkerchief no longer felt like a memory. It felt like closure. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free gently. Sometimes it tears everything open so you can finally breathe. And as I walked back to my truck, I knew this wasn't the end of the story, only the end of their version of it.